When you think of Nepal, the first image that comes to mind is probably, the stunning, towering silence of the Himalayas.
For sure, the peaks.
But beneath those peaks, the political landscape is, well, it's rarely quiet. It's a nation with this profound resilience, yes, but also a history just marked by deep, often really violent political turbulence.
And that frustration, it just boiled over spectacularly in September 2025. What we saw was a nationwide firestorm really centered in Kathmandu, but radiating out. It's now just known as the Gen Z protests.
That's right. And our sources describe this as so much more than a typical protest. They call it a seismic rejection. This was a massive physical uprising spearheaded by the nation's youth. We're talking teenagers, young adults, aged 13 to 28.
An uprising that ultimately forced the Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli to step down.
Exactly. So the mission for us today is to deep dive into this moment. This was a national reckoning against decades of corruption and a really entrenched political elite.
The whole movement, it really boils down to a revolution against what the youth called the suffocating revolving door of Nepali politics.
A revolving door. I like that.
Yeah, and to really get the scale of the anger, you have to look at the three main targets. Oli, of course, from the CPN-UML, Sher Bahadur Dubba of the Nepali Congress, and Pushpa Kamal Dahal, everyone knows him as Prachanda, from the Maoist Center.
And the defining feature of that, the Troika. Since the 2015 Constitution was put in place, these three aging figures have rotated the premiership, 8 times?
8 times. Between just 3 men in 10 years,
Yeah.
it's a perfect illustration of the complete lack of systemic change.
Right.
And the context here is just. It's vital. Corruption isn't a symptom, it's the structure. Transparency International's 2024 index ranked Nepal a damning 108th out of 180 countries. For the youth, the whole system was just elite capture.
Okay, let's unpack this because that context really sets the stage. You have this political system that everyone sees as self-serving, run by the same 3 guys, and then suddenly it's face-to-face with a generation whose main weapon is a digital screen. So what were the immediate sparks? How did a digital fight turn into a physical revolution that literally tore down institutions?
What's so fascinating here is that the immediate spark wasn't a news scandal. It was the government's desperate, clumsy attempt to silence the discussion of the scandals that already existed.
Which really speaks to that generational divide. Before the crackdown in September, Gen Z, who make up over 40% of the population under 25, had already launched this online crusade. They were using social media not for dances, but for political warfare, creating viral memes, hashtags like the famous hashtag Nepo babies.
And these weren't just vague criticisms. The memes were sharp. They targeted the stark, almost vulgar contrast between the average Nepali life and the opulent lives of politicians' kids. We're talking luxury cars, overseas mansions, influencer lifestyles.
All allegedly funded by public money.
Exactly. One activist is quoted saying, youngsters in Nepal were making a lot of videos about politicians and their children and the luxurious life they live.
And this online push, it just hit a definitive wall on September 4, 2025. The Oli-led government, in what has to be one of the worst political miscalculations ever, invokes national security and suspends 26 platforms.
26. I mean, this was the entire digital public square. Facebook, X, YouTube, even WhatsApp, basically the air that this generation breathed. They claimed it was about non-compliance with new rules.
But no one was buying that.
Not for a second. To the hundreds of thousands of young people in these digital forums, the reason was totally transparent. They saw it as Ollie's desperate last-ditch ploy to, quote, stop people from posting about the luxurious lives of the families and children of corrupt politicians. It was a declaration of war.
It seems like the government just fundamentally misunderstood that by muzzling the digital space, they didn't stop the conversation.
No.
They just moved it from the virtual world onto the physical streets.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the frustration turned to just pure fury almost overnight. On September 8th, students, many of them still in their school uniforms, they just abandoned their screens and marched on Parliament. Their signs were so blunt. Shut down corruption and not social media.
Unban social media.
Exactly.
And the state's response to these kids, these teenagers and young adults, it was swift, it was disproportionate, and it was just terrifyingly deadly.
It was brutal. Police were deployed with tear gas, rubber bullets, and then it escalated so quickly to live ammunition. Our sources confirm 19 people died on that first day of confrontation alone.
19.
And the most tragic part, one of the victims was a 12-year-old child. Over 300 others were injured. This violence was meant to crush the movement, but it instantly catalyzed it into a full-scale uprising.
That level of state violence against its own children. I mean, that's an unimaginable escalation. It completely destroyed any shred of legitimacy the government had left. And that leads directly to the climax on September 9th, where the protesters stopped targeting symbols and started targeting the politicians themselves.
By the 9th, yeah, the movement had moved far beyond just marching. Protesters were setting fire to the physical symbols of the state and the elite. They torched the Supreme Court, they torched Parliament, and they specifically went after the private, opulent residences of those top three leaders, Oli, Doba, and Prachanda.
And the images from that day, they became instant global symbols of this revolt. The most viral image wasn't the smoke, was it? It was the footage of protesters finding and incinerating these massive wads of cash they found hidden inside the homes.
Exactly. That cash was the ultimate physical proof of the corruption they'd been memeing about for months. Oli resigned that same day. But the sources are clear. This was a revolution against the whole system, not just one man.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the charges that fueled those burning houses.
Let's do it.
We'll start with the one who fell first. KP Sharma Oli, 73 years old. The protesters explicitly branded him the thief.
And for good reason. Oli was accused of weaponizing the very agency meant to fight corruption, the CIA. He was seen as using it as a political tool, a shield for his allies, and a sword to attack his rivals.
And the specific scandals were huge.
Oh, they were. The one that really fueled the fire in 2025 was the Lalita Niwas land scam. This case implicated people in his own party in falsifying documents to seize billions of rupees worth of public land.
So the protesters chant, "KP, you thief, leave the country," which they scrolled on his burning residence.
Ah,
That was his political epitaph.
it absolutely was.
Okay, next up, Sher Bahadur Doba, 78, the five-time prime minister, the epitome of the old guard. His record on corruption was already long, right? The Nepal Airlines wide-body aircraft deal.
That was at Rs 40 billion deal. 40 billion. I mean, to give you some context, that's nearly 40% of the entire development aid Nepal gets in a year. And it was allegedly all altered for kickbacks. So that baggage was there, but the immediate rage, the thing that gave him the moniker,
The refugee racketeer.
the refugee racketeer, that sounds particularly cruel. It was. The scandal focused on his wife, the foreign minister Arzarana Doba. She was accused of running a scheme that fraudulently registered genuine Nepalese as fake Bhutanese refugees so they could be resettled in the U.S.
Profiting off human desperation.
Millions in illicit gains. And the scene at their home was one of the most violent moments of the uprising. Mobs physically dragged the couple from their house, beat them, and then set it ablaze. And just like at Oli's house, they found bundles of Rs, 1,000 notes, and torched them on camera.
A symbol of monetizing human suffering. Unbelievable.
And that brings us to the third one.
Right. Prachanda, 70 years old, the former Maoist guerrilla who was supposed to represent the people, his presence in this trio, it just symbolized the ultimate betrayal of a revolution.
He was labeled the Maoist money launderer. The most enduring charge against him is the alleged embezzlement of billions from UN-monitored funds during the 2006 peace process.
That was money for his own ex-rebels.
Money meant for their welfare and rehabilitation, supposedly diverted right into his party's coffers. It was theft from his own former soldiers. And the scandals kept coming, right up to the Bhuti Gandaki hydropower scandal, where Ars's $9 billion just vanished.
And all three of them were implicated in that one.
All three. So when protesters went to his home, it was no surprise when they also unearthed cash bundles, sparking yet another inquiry. The picture painted by the sources is total complicity. They were all, as one protester put it, selling our country for their own greed.
So the burning houses, the stacks of cash, that was the physical manifestation of a corruption story that had been building for decades. But the real engine of this, it wasn't just anger at graft, it was this profound structural economic despair.
That's the critical piece. That's what connects the elite's crimes to the youth's rage. You've got a youth unemployment rate well over 20%. And the direct consequence is heartbreaking. 1,500 migrants, mostly young people, leave the country every single month for dangerous jobs abroad.
And yet it's that very diaspora that's keeping the lights on back home.
Exactly. Remittances prop up a staggering 25% of Nepal's entire GDP. The irony is just excruciating. The country survives on the hard work and remittances of young people abroad. While the politicians and their children enjoy luxury at home, the Nepo kids became the physical face of a parasitic system.
And this wasn't a protest run by traditional parties. The sources stress it was completely organic. So how did this Gen Z revolution coordinate itself?
It was a leaderless fire. a huge contrast to the movements of 1990 or 2006. This was coordinated almost entirely on encrypted Discord servers that just swelled, reaching 145,000 members practically overnight.
Which means the government's attempt to ban social media was not just clumsy, it was completely counterproductive.
Totally. It took a virtual resistance that was maybe easy for them to ignore and forced it onto the streets where they had no way to contain it. And their demands were systemic: anti-corruption laws, youth quotas in government, digital democracy.
And they got an immediate, dramatic political outcome, a real generational victory.
They did. Ali's resignation led to an interim government. And crucially, it was led by a known youth activist, Sudan Gurung of Hami, Nepal. This was instantly hailed by young people as a generational victory. As one 20-year-old protester said, "This is our revolution. It's our turn now."
So what does this all mean for Nepal moving forward? I mean, Ali's fall was the immediate result. The social media ban was lifted, probes were launched, but our sources also warned that the extra legality and potential for more violence still linger.
Right. The initial uprising was absolutely authentic. It was this powerful, homegrown fury for justice, opportunity, and human dignity. But, chaos attracts opportunists. The sources point out that pro-monarchy fringe groups also tried to capitalize on the instability to hijack the youth's movement for their own ends.
So Nepal's Gen Z has, it seems, permanently redrawn the map of resistance. They proved that digital coordination can successfully target and physically dismantle an entrenched elite.
Absolutely. But the central lingering question now is what happens next. The core problem, as the sources articulate, wasn't just removing the individual's Oli Dewa Prachanda, it's the entire rotten system they built. This revolt demands a fundamental change to that system. Now that the youth have won this first spectacular battle, the challenge shifts from who is in power to whether the system can actually be cleansed of corruption, or if this victory will simply usher in a new, maybe even extra-legal power structure that inherits the very same flaws of the last. That is the true fight ahead.